Hey, it's James, Father's Rights and Resources, hashtag HowiGotCustody. Everybody's pretty much sick of attorneys lying to them, right? And lying, deceiving, or ignorantly doing the wrong thing. Some attorneys just do stuff because they're dumb and ignorant. Most of them are hustlers, crooks, and cons, and they know what they're doing and they don't care. But this whole business with this hashtag TFRM or the Father's Rights Movement groups out there, I talk about them a lot in a lot of videos, especially on Instagram. But there's a huge problem with them in particular, the ones who use the Father's Rights Movement logo. And there's some guys who start off and get involved in the Father's Rights Movement, and they're sincere, they want to fix the system, they got screwed. But, and there's all kinds of stuff that's wrong with them. But first of all, there is no real Father's Rights Movement. Let's just be real about it. You know, a couple years ago, the Me Too movement had a bunch of marches, and they were in the streets all over the country, everywhere. You know, there were protesters all last summer. You know, somebody can make the case a lot of people protesting were paid or fake or just some knuckleheads that infiltrated or hijacked a real movement, or and people got away with a whole bunch of hustling and faking and fraud and defrauding people. But if you look at Martin Luther King, you know, the women's rights movement, suffrage movement, Malcolm X, Gandhi, you know, anybody that made headway in any kind of movement, there's nothing even close to, I mean, you can't get more than 10 fathers together in a meeting half the time in your local city. And that's one reason that the Father's Rights Movement never existed, if it ever did. If it did, it was in a couple of little pockets where people were doing individual stuff in individual cases. There was, in Washington, starting back in 1973, there was a group called Dads of Washington. They were part of Dads America, which started out of Portland. The guy who ran that, Bob Carls, ran it for a good 30 years. He's the one who first really helped me in my case and taught me some things. And like I say a lot of times, he taught me about 1% of everything that I share with everybody for free. So, and I share stuff that attorneys will never tell you. And the Father's Rights Movement folks aren't doing this because the Father's Rights Movement or those groups on Facebook are filled with people who lost in court and got screwed. And then they're out there giving people legal advice after they got creamed in court. What kind of sense does that make? If you're a mechanic and you work on somebody's transmission and you break 3 transmissions in a row, and they turn around, they want a refund, or they want it redone for free, and you cost the dealership or Joe's transmission service auto shop or whatever, you cost them thousands of dollars, you're not going to be running clinics on how to fix transmissions. Okay? If you're a midget who got cut from your middle school basketball team, you're not going to be doing a lot of basketball camps. If you lost in family court, why are you up there giving? Now, it's one thing to support other fathers, and what the Father's Rights Movement does do is have a bunch of fathers that get together and just whine and cry and pout for 2 or 3 hours if they ever get around to an agenda in any of their meetings. The last meeting I went to, these guys whined, cried, and pouted, and they talked about doing some kind of meeting and rallies and talking about when they're next going to talk about, potentially talking about doing something. So at that meeting, there was one guy who hadn't seen his kid in several months, and I said, "Have you done a contempt motion?" And he said, "I tried once and lost last year." I said, "Why don't you try again?" And he didn't have an answer for that. He just quit and gave up like a coward. I told him I got my daughter's mother found in contempt the first time I tried without an attorney, and I beat up on a 17-year veteran attorney. I've seen guys go to court and they give the mother a slap on the wrist, and they go to court again, and the court's like, "You're really in violation now. Why wouldn't you try it again?" I know a guy who got 5 contempts within 3 years. After 2 or 3 times, he didn't win the contempt, but he got makeup time. They didn't find contempt. They said it wasn't harsh enough to do contempt. They're always giving women a break or cutting some slack. But that's what happens at fathers' rights meetings. They never get anywhere. They never get to solutions. They don't want solutions. They just want to whine and pout and cry, and they want a counselor. They want to cuddle with each other and spoon and hug and suck their thumb and think of a happy place and pretend that this all is going to go away someday. Or they want to spend time on a 50-50 shared parenting law that won't even work. Here's a great example of how stupid people in the fathers' rights movement are. Because, again, remember, these guys lost in court. So they're losers in court. Not that they're losers as fathers or as human beings. But they lost in court. And they're up here creating groups, and people are coming into the groups and asking, what should I do about this? What should I do about that? Well, let me point out this first. I went into an Idaho group one time. This dad, his baby's mom, her new boyfriend, was supposedly molesting their daughter. And so this dad said, I don't want to give my kid back. And I said, why would you give the kid back? He goes, well, there's a court order and blah, blah. I said, so what? Your kid's getting molested. You want to obey a court order and kiss a judge's butt or kiss a court's butt when women don't get found in contempt a lot of times on the first try? And contempt is a willful violation of a valid court order without reasonable excuse. First of all, you got to have a court order. That's valid. Then you got to have a violation. Then it has to be done in bad faith with animosity or, bad faith, not good faith. Then it has to be willful, and it has to be without reasonable excuse. If you have all those elements, but you have a reasonable excuse, you can't be found in contempt. Most people in the entire world, including judges, would say that's a reasonable excuse if your kid's getting molested. So in this fathers' rights group in Idaho, after I made my comment, why would you even give the kid back? You wouldn't send it over to a total stranger. You're giving the kid back because the title of the enabler of the child molester is mom. Why would you give the kid back? Then this dad comes in on the Facebook page and says, you better give the kid back. You can get in trouble with the court and go to jail. I said, where does it say that? He said, well, it's in the law. I said, tell me what the law is. Don't just tell me there's a law out there. Tell me what the law is. And the guy gave me the law, and I went and looked at it. And it does say if you withhold the child for a long period of time in violation of a court order, they had some kind of title of custodial interference or parental kidnapping or something like that. About 4 sentences down within that law, it said, unless there's imminent danger or harm to the child's physical or emotional welfare. This stupid jackass of a sellout with the mentality of a house slave who sold out to the entire movement. House slaves on a plantation. They were black slaves who got in the house with the master on the plantation, and they got, for those of you who don't know, and they would get a bed in the house, they would get food in the house, but they would go out and whip the slaves, and they would catch slaves that ran away and shoot and kill them and stuff. They started getting a mentality that those slaves were inferior to even them. So this guy is in the fathers' rights movement, and he's saying, go endanger your kid and get her molested. Just bow down to the court because of what this law says. This stupid jackass, incompetent, moronic, dumbed-down, airheaded piece of garbage gave this guy advice to continually let his child get molested when the dad had every right under the very same law that he quoted or cited. But this moron only read the first line, and like a butthurt little sissy little coward, like a lot of dads are, he tucks his tail and gets scared as soon as he sees the opening line of the law. The law has a whole couple paragraphs. I read the whole law and got down to the bottom, and what I said was in line with the law. And this moron tried to warn the guy, you better give the kid back or you're going to get in trouble and you're going to go to jail. And I'm like, how can you go to jail for protecting your kid from a child molester? This is the type of morons that fill the Facebook pages of TFRM or the Fathers' Rights Movement. These are the type of idiots that are on there giving advice. And then the other thing that they're doing that's a waste of time, trying to pass 50-50 laws. I have a whole video on 50-50 shared parenting and why it will not work. The obvious thing is women lie about child abuse and domestic violence all the time right now to get leverage in custody in court, in divorce cases and custody battles. We all know that. If you have a 50-50 shared parenting law, they will always have an exception unless there's child abuse or domestic violence. They'll never say you can always get 50-50. That's impossible. That'll never, ever happen. 50-50 laws have passed in like 2 or 3 states in the past 50 years, okay? So even if you get a law passed, they're going to have an exception. So if they say the dad's going to get 50-50 automatically, unless there's evidence of domestic violence and child abuse, guess what the mothers who already accuse dads of that, guess what they're going to do immediately? The allegations of domestic violence and child abuse are going to skyrocket. And that law will be totally moot. Now, there's a law that passed in Arkansas recently that says there's a presumption of 50-50 unless the judge thinks it's not in the best interest of the child. That's even worse because we already have laws that say in the best interest of the child, and the judges totally ignore the evidence and who's credible and the witnesses and the need for both parents equally. When the best interest of the child should be automatically presumed both parents. And I have a video on that, the best argument for 50-50. I explain all those types of things, why that should be why it should be that way. So we have good laws in the books already. Judges ignore the good laws because they ignore evidence and they ignore who's credible. They believe the liars. So if you change the laws, they're going to ignore those laws and they're going to believe the liars again. I can't emphasize or say as hardcore enough how stupid some of these idiotic morons are. They got no common sense. They don't have any deductive reasoning. They don't have basic human logic. They can't even read a law that they cite themselves. A stupid jackass member of a father's rights group in Idaho says you have to force your kid to go back to the child molesting boyfriend of the mother because you'll get in trouble with the court because of this law. And the law says you have a right to withhold your kid if they're going to be in danger. Because he couldn't read more than a headline. He might not have ever read the law. He might have looked it up when I demanded that he tell me because he didn't cite it at first. That's what judges and lawyers and cops do all the time. They say, well, this is the law. This is what we do. You don't have any rights to this, or I have a right to do that. You demand, a warrant, a writ of habeas corpus, or a statement of probable cause from an officer, and they're like, I don't have to do that. So people in authority ignore laws all the time. But these morons from the fathers' rights movement, now, again, they're decent dads. They went to court. They got screwed. But they pretend to be Johnny Cochran or Perry Mason or God's gift to the family court system because they went through something and they saw something for a minute that was diabolical or that was an unjust case or cause. So they think they're an expert. So I'll go on there and I'll say stuff like 50-50 laws won't work. They won't pass. The 50-50 law in Arkansas, it doesn't just say not an exception for cases of domestic violence. It vaguely gives the judge discretion to just totally renege or say, I'm not going to do it because it's not in the best interest of the child. And he doesn't have to explain anything except rubber stamp best interest of the child like they already do. That law is totally moot. And I've gone on to pages where people have said, hooray, thank God for the legislators in Arkansas. And I'm like, did you read the law? It says it just goes back to whatever the judge thinks is the best interest of the child. And they're like, well, at least they tried. Or can't you give some effort that somebody's making? Can't you give props to somebody actually making an effort? You stupid moron. If you're making an effort for something and you're not successful and you're doing it all wrong and it's a waste of time and energy and it didn't work, you didn't accomplish anything. See, what happens is people get into the family court system. A dad gets blindsided and screwed over and he's like, I got to do something about this. Oh, let me join this group. So he's a rookie. He's been less than a year in family court, maybe a couple years, and somebody like me comes by, and I've been doing this since 2001. At the time of this video, that's 20 years under my belt dealing with thousands of court cases, 15 to 20,000 court cases in family court as a legal assistant at a law firm, as a contract paralegal, working with several attorneys who think the system is corrupt, winning in my own case in the Court of Appeals, working with thousands of fathers who got full custody on their own without a lawyer. And this rookie comes in and tells me I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. If you were a rookie on the Chicago Bulls, would you start running practice and telling Michael Jordan to calm down? He doesn't know what the heck he's talking about after his third or fourth or fifth ring. you would get a black eye like Steve Kerr did by the hand of Michael Jordan. If you were a draft pick for the Detroit Lions, or let's say the Cowboys, and you're Emmitt Smith's backup or third string running back, would you start telling him and giving him ideas of what he should do, or would you shut up and sit there and listen? The all-time leading rusher in the NFL. I mean, come on. I've never seen a group of people in a movement or in any kind of group that were that stupid and dumb, except for devious, conniving, lying politicians. But they know what they're doing. They're lying on purpose to mislead the people to get control of them. These dads don't know what the hell they're doing. They don't even have the first clue. They lost in court and got creamed. They spent $10, $20, $50, $100,000 on an attorney. And they're in there advising people as to which next attorney to get because they heard a rumor that the attorney was good, or they have a good AVO rating, AVVO, or their mother's brother, sister's cousin used them once and they got a good outcome. But nobody looked into what happened in that case. They were already willing to settle, so it's not an arguing, highly contentious, contested case. They're on those groups giving people horrible advice. And in the example I gave, endangering a precious child like a moron. And then I get in there and I have a whole video breaking down my sister with Down syndrome can use her deductive reasoning and figure out, oh, they lie about domestic violence and child abuse already? You'll pass a law that says you get 50-50 unless there's child abuse and domestic violence? Well, 100% of contested cases, they'll just lie again. And you won't get it. See, the only chance for a law to be good where you have a 50-50 presumption is 50-50 presumption for everybody. And if one parent wants to move away, that's their problem. And the person who stays gets custody because that person is cowardly moving away and say, I can't handle the child in this broken relationship. I can't be a single mother. I need a network. I'm homesick. I need to be with my mommy. The umbilical cord is still attached. All this immature stuff. You decided to have a child with this person. Your life is over for 18 years. Normal human beings make a sacrifice for their kids and revolve their life around their kids. You're saying, I need mommy and daddy and my community of friends, and I need a better job back home, and I miss home. That's pathetic. So there needs to be a law that says presumption of 50-50 unless there's a conviction in criminal court of domestic violence or child abuse. That way, it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt if you take it to trial. Now, a lot of guys will cop a plea to domestic violence because they're scared and their public defender talks them into it because the prosecutor gets Violence Against Women Act bonus money from Joe Biden's Violence Against Women Act that he pushed and passed. He pushed in 1994 as a senator, then renewed in 2014, 20 years later. And when Joe Biden was told women lie about domestic violence all the time, he said, the video's on YouTube somewhere, he said, that's bizarre. He's like, what are we even arguing about? We assume that women are victims of domestic violence. And the Violence Against Women Act, just as a side note, it said the intent of the law, in the law it says the intent of the law is to protect women and children. Well, women commit 60% of child abuse, so why are you only protecting the number one child abuser? See, it's all based on a culture and hype and hoopla. But you know why Violence Against Women Act got passed or even put in there? First of all, the feminist groups paid off Joe Biden because he was well known as a senator, and he admitted he did favors for money and he paid people back. He's on video admitting that. So it doesn't matter your politics or what side you're on, whatever. That's a fact. It's on video. If you don't like it, then you're a butthurt cult worshiper of one party or the other and a cult worshiper of a cult of personality, and you're stupid to think that politicians are sincere about anything for the most part. So they're the reason that we have some of the corrupt laws that we have. So the Violence Against Women Act gives money to prosecutors. Like if a prosecutor spends $5,000 prosecuting a guy for domestic violence, they get $5,000 federal bonus money. So they won't prosecute women perpetrators, or they won't prosecute a case where a dad's a victim because they don't get any money. Even though women commit 50% of domestic violence. It's the Violence Against Women Act, and all we care about is women victims. federal dollars are going to one gender, and nobody cares. But the reason why that happened is because feminists fervently get together or get in positions of power and have a lifelong vendetta where they're going to fix the system and they're going to get after these men and they're going to destroy men. The fathers' rights movement gets together and guys get together and do one protest. They do a rally at a courthouse. They talk to a legislator a couple times. And then they see there's not a dent in the system. They quit like a bunch of sissy punk cowards. So if you were devoted and committed to making change and you're going to be part of this thing, why didn't you stick to it? All the feminists have been sticking to it for 100 years. They had an agenda. If you read Daniel Amnius's book, The Case for Father Custody, there's a 400-page online PDF where he quotes radical feminists or feminists from the early 1900s saying, we're going to try and eliminate the father. We're going to try and make the father just a cash cow and make their role insignificant in the family. So they've been at it for 100 years. They've been persistent and they haven't stopped. Okay? You can't get, like in Washington and Tacoma, there were two judges that, usually when you're a sitting judge, nobody runs against you. It's blasphemy. It's like taboo. It's the unwritten code in the Bar Association. But the two worst judges in family court in Tacoma, in Pierce County Family Court, were Catherine Nelson, and I forget the other one. I'm going to look up the other one right now. Pierce County Superior Court judges. But anyway, two brave attorneys ran against these sitting judges. Catherine Nelson got the Powell children murdered. She was overseeing that case, and because of her stupidity, she didn't have a secure, supervised facility for a guy who allegedly was a murderer. She had an open public visitation exchange like a stupid, airheaded moron. And so those kids got killed at her hand. So Judge Catherine Nelson allowed that. And Stephanie Arend. So she only got in because she worked at Honeywell and some big law firm. Is all politics. They hooked her up to get in there. So these two corrupt judges who rule against men, Catherine Nelson is a big fat tub of man-hating goo. And Stephanie Arend is the same thing. Totally corrupt man-hater. And places children with abusers all the time. So, and I know cases offhand. So, back in 2012, there were attorneys that were running against these two judges. And I've always said the way to change the system is do what we do with anything else. How do you change a corrupt corporation or a corrupt entity or a corrupt politician or state? You vote them out. You fire them. If I go to a store or if I go to a restaurant and my food is cold and then I get it taken back and it's cold again and I come back later because the food's delicious and I give them another chance and the food's cold again, I tell the manager they might fire that cook or they'll discipline them. So when you get disciplined for your misconduct, you will change your conduct or you'll just get permanently fired. So I've always said the real answer is to target judges one by one and expose them for the corrupt family law rulings. And then when somebody runs against them, vote them out specifically for the corrupt family law rulings. This is common sense. Anybody with half a brain can figure this out. But the fathers' rights movement is full of dumbed down, airheaded, moronic imbeciles who don't think. They're acting out of their emotions. They're being effeminate males and emotionally reacting to the tragedy of their own court case, and they're not thinking logically, how do we win this war on fatherhood? So, if a judge gets voted out after somebody campaigned and exposed them giving custody to a mom who's an abuser or on drugs and repeatedly giving custody to a parent who lives with a sex offender boyfriend or something like that, like Stephanie Arend did in a case that I could easily look up and find the name on. The mother admitted to be the getaway driver. She was the getaway driver in a murder, and she was admitted to being mentally ill. And they took custody away from the dad when he had custody. and gave it to the mom, and her boyfriend was a registered sex offender with 3 felonies for heroin and cocaine possession. And Stephanie Arendt said, "Oh, just don't leave the sex offender alone with the kids." So when this is and I'm getting to the point about this is what happens with the fathers' rights movement or fathers' rights groups. So I was out of town around this time, but I still, because I care about this, I called up a group called The Other Parent, toprights.org, which isn't even around anymore like most fathers' rights groups or non-custodial parents groups. That just disappear and die out after a while because everybody gets burnt out, which is the problem. Then there's the next cycle of people go, how come nobody's doing anything about it? I'm going to do something about it. And they go in there and they're all gung-ho. And if they come across me, I'll say, this is the way you got to do that. And they're like, F you, James. You don't know what you're talking about, old man. They have to change this because in my emotions and feelings, I feel like something has to be done. I'm like, okay. For 50 years, nobody's accomplished anything in the fathers' rights movement that's been going on since the early 70s. And now you're the Martin Luther King of the fathers' rights movement. You're God's gift to the fathers' rights movement. So you're going to fix everything? Good luck. Okay. And a lot of those people, I check back with them a year later, and they're not even around. And here I am 20 years later. And stupid jackasses won't listen to a word I got to say. Even though I'm basically, if you want to use an analogy, I'm like a 5-star general in the war on fathers. I've been around for 20 years. Dad's America, which started in 1973 or so, isn't around anymore. It's defunct. The fathers' rights group that had an office in Las Vegas, they had an office to themselves, a staff of about like 12, 15 people. Were helping guys do paperwork and get on the offensive, and they sold that building to whoever's in charge of that. I forget his name offhand. I visited there a couple times. Whoever was in charge of that got burnt out, I guess, sold it to an attorney who promised to continue the fathers' rights legacy and stuff, and he was a sellout, and he hasn't done anything like that, doesn't advertise that he helps dads or anything like that. So this is what happens, okay? So I'm out of town, and I call up The Other Parent in Washington. I call up any other fathers' rights guys that I know. And I said, these guys need volunteers to go door to door in a targeted area, the people who are likely going to vote, and tell them how bad these judges are. Get on the ground, grassroots, tell the voter, because most voters don't know anything about these judges, and they just go with, oh, who do the cops recommend, who do the fire department recommend, who does this recommend, and these judges wine and dine these people and convince them that I'm the, God's gift to the court system, or they buy their vote, or they buy their endorsement, and so everybody looks at the endorsements. So they need the lawyers need people on the ground to go door to door in a target area, and they think they can flip the thing, and these guys are going to win. You know how many guys showed up and volunteered and went door to door after that? This was the one chance I've been preaching and telling everybody, we got to get people to run against these judges, and then when they run against them, we got to volunteer and help them out to help kick out these judges. All you guys out there watching complain and say, why isn't anybody doing anything about this? I get that comment all the time. I just had a comment the other day on my Instagram on IG Live. When is anybody going to do what's the government doing about all this corruption against fathers and detriment to children? The government isn't coming to save or rescue anybody. It's the government's court system. It's up to the people who are disenfranchised. I mean, when slavery was abolished, you had, freed slaves that were a part of the movement, but you also had to have plenty of white people. So, and there was churches and stuff like that. But you had, the most passionate people were the disenfranchised, or those people who were passionate about equality. In the civil rights movement, you had a mix of people, but those people were all passionate about it, and you had the victims mixed in there. In the women's suffrage movement, you had marches and things like that where it was women only, and they got bottles thrown at them by men, or they got attacked and all that other stuff because they were getting out of line, getting out of the kitchen or whatever. And here we have the fathers' rights movement, and what are we doing? Everybody's secretly meeting in a TFRM, the fathers' rights movement meeting in somebody's house and backyard somewhere, and Never go in public with anything. All they do is go on these chats and Facebook pages, and they chat with one another, and their entire audience is other father victims. Everybody was a no-show. This was the best chance they had in Tacoma, Washington, to unseat two of the worst judges ever in family court. And they didn't even show up and attempt to try. At all. They had a formula down. They targeted the voting block that they could flip and change the vote. All the fathers' rights movement people were no-shows. That's what happens. The fathers' rights movement, the individual dads get in there to whine, cry, and pout, and hope somebody waves a magic wand, or mommy comes with them to the meeting and mommy's going to rescue them like mommy did when they were a little boy. The movement is only going to happen when guys actually get up and move and do something, like what I just said. Or when they work with legislatures to pass laws that say there has to be a criminal crime for that to happen. All people have to do right now is, by preponderance of evidence, lie and say, oh, they're a child abuser, oh, I'm a victim of domestic violence, and put on a good show and cry crocodile tears, and they get a restraining order to set up the divorce, and then they go to court and say, oh, he's a domestic violence perpetrator, look, I got this restraining order. And guys don't fight the restraining order. They go in court, oh, I'm trying to reconcile with her, or I want to work it out and co-parent. And she's saying, I don't want anything to do with this guy, I'm scared of him, I want him to get away. Oh, I want to talk to her and co-parent. And you commit suicide because you look like a stalker. You're saying, I want her, I want to be with her, I want to talk to her. The first thing any guy should say when they go to court and there's a restraining order is, I could care less whether I talk to this woman ever again, like I did. It worked for me. I'm not advising you that's what you have to do, but in my opinion, any dad who goes to court with half a brain when somebody's trying to get a restraining order, like I've seen dads say, well, I'm hoping and wishing and praying to reconcile with my wife. Okay, while she's been withholding the child from you for weeks or months at a time, she's committing child abuse, and you're hoping and wishing to reconcile with her. And she has a free will. You can pray all you want. I believe prayer works, but God doesn't even override somebody's free will. So you can wish and hope and, hope mommy appears and rescue you guys, or some angel comes flying out of the sky and say, I'm the angel called justice, I'm here at your door to help serve you justice. And while you're wishing and hoping and waiting for the mother to reconcile with you, you're losing out on your bond with your kids are being brainwashed, and you're winning bonus points being Mr. Nice Guy. If you fight to keep the wife or the girlfriend or to reconcile, you might lose them, and you automatically lose the children. If you fight for the kids, you might lose the wife or the girlfriend, but you get the kids. Who cares? You're always going to be those kids' father. You're not always going to be that boyfriend or husband. Whether you believe in... Now, I don't ever tell anybody, hey, you have to divorce or something like that. That's a decision in your own conscience that you got to do. I would never tell somebody what to do with their life. But to me, it's asinine and stupid to say... you can still want to be legally married and get a legal separation and let the other side file for divorce because you can't do it in your own conscience. That's great. You're already forgiven the person for destroying your life and stuff like that. But how many child abusers and child molesters will you forgive for molesting your kids? Oh, I automatically forgive them. I just want to work it out. I don't want them to go to jail or anything like that. I'm just hoping... that they'll help me with the counseling with the kids or something crazy. We don't do that. If the child abuser, nobody would do that. But if the child abuser's name is mother, then we cater to them, and we don't care about the child abuse and the alienation and the emotional and psychological abuse and the brainwashing and using them as a tool and a weapon against the father. We don't care about that. And the fathers' rights movement groups and people in there, they'll say, play Mr. Nice Guy. Don't be too aggressive. Don't go into court and do this and that. Okay, so I've worked on cases as a legal assistant, a contract paralegal under attorneys, and on my own case, and just watched friends and worked with fathers, helping them find resources and stuff. 15 to 20,000 cases, and I've always seen when a dad gets on the offensive in the beginning and he goes to war like the war that it is, once the mother declares war on him and their kids, those guys always do better than any other guy with an attorney, or after they fire their attorney, when they get on the fence, they do better. Not every guy wins. Sometimes it's too late. Sometimes they're too far behind the 8 ball. Sometimes the system is just going to do what it's going to do. But I've seen 0% of the time when guys play Mr. Nice Guy, I've never seen a guy win, unless the mother was already ready to reconcile. But the Father's Rights Movement group people, they go out and hold signs outside the courthouse. Men are people too. Please like us. Honk if you love fathers. Honk if you think kids should have fathers. All this stuff that goes without saying. When I go out and protest, I put on my sign the number of a case, and I'll say, this judge places children with sex offenders or child abusers and hates fathers and destroys families. So that judge, when they come walking into work and they see my sign or they look out the window, they're embarrassed because the clerks can look up that case and look up what they did. And everybody in their workplace might be frowning upon them for what they did. I disturbed their bubble. They're in a bubble that's protective, and you think that they're scared? I mean, sometimes when a judge lets out a sex offender and they go out and rape again, and then a news station comes to the judge's house in their driveway and puts a mic in their face and says, "Hey, you got any comment on, that guy that you let out just killed or raped another child?" They just get in their car and they walk to work, and they're never affected because nobody runs against them, because nobody uses that against them, because all the attorneys are in on it, or they're all a bunch of cowardly simps. Like Adolf Hitler's henchmen, they all said during the Nuremberg trials, "Oh, we were just following orders." So they might have all thought that it was an atrocity what they were doing, but they didn't stand up because they were following orders. So if they all would have stood down and said, "No, we're not going to kill these Jews or torture these Jews," or they would have stood up to Hitler, he would have no power, because he would order them to do something and they would say no. And then what's he going to do? Hitler didn't kill anybody. All his henchmen did. And all his henchmen did it by peer pressure, because they were worried if they stuck their neck out and said, "This isn't right. If I don't kill these Jews or torture them or round them up, then Hitler's going to have me killed." When all along, when they went to the Nuremberg trials, they all were saying, "Oh, we're just following orders." So in theory, based on their own testimony, they would have all stood up to him if they all knew. So why don't guys all stand up against the judges and cohesively come together and have a real movement like women do, or like go out and flood the streets like they did in the Me Too movement or whatever? Because guys are laid back and don't want any drama in general, which is not a bad thing. But then when it comes to time to fight and apply that stuff, they don't care, because they want somebody to come and coddle and hug with them. And like I said, spoon and cuddle with them and suck each other's thumb and affirm their feelings and all this other stuff. When somebody just declared war on you, we don't do that in war. We only do that when we're dealing with our baby's mom. And we're such a bunch of feminine simps that we just got to bow down to her, or we'll say stuff like, "Oh, I'm trying to reconcile with her. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to work it out." Or you talk with your Father's Rights Movement buddies on Facebook and they say, "Go in there and try and be nice as possible," when that never works. Except for the court say, "Oh, you're nice. Okay, you get no visitation. You need to pay $1,000 a month in child support. I need to investigate you." That's what you get from the Father's Rights Movement. And one of the worst, most idiotic, sellout, punk, simp, sissy, coward things that the Father's Rights Movement leaders say all the time, I got to talk about the Ohio and Michigan group too. But they'll say, like, if I get on a group, I'm like, "Why aren't you going for full custody? The mother's withholding the children from you. She's a child abuser. She's emotionally manipulating the children. She shows no good judgment. You'll never have co-parenting abilities with somebody who's so intransigent and willfully withholds the children and uses them as a weapon. Why would you want to work with a child abuser? Why would you negotiate with a terrorist?" The Father's Rights Movement people say, "Oh, we're not going to stoop to their level." So if a prosecutor throws a child molester in jail, that child molester might get beat up in jail. That child molester is going to be tortured. Would you tell a prosecutor, "Don't stoop to the child molester's level. That child molester victimized that child, but now you're going to turn around and put that pedophile at risk with the general population in jail and stuff"? You see how stupid and asinine these ignorant, punk, sissy, coward simps in the father's rights movement are? They've never accomplished anything in 50 years of a father's rights movement. There's a new fad of just any old jack-off, dork or weirdo saying, oh, I want to run father's rights movement in Alabama or Georgia. I got screwed, so let me start it up and just start talking to random people who lost in court, and we're going to start advising guys how to win in court even though we got creamed. And we think in our effeminate feelings that going for custody is mean and harsh. Well, first of all, you stupid jackass, the court always gives custody to one person, almost always. The judges say on record, we don't like 50-50 because it's back and forth between houses and stuff like that. I have an argument that I like to say the reason for 50-50 and full custody, and nobody considers that, and nobody goes into court and argues that stuff and tells the judges this to unbrainwash them from this culture of the child needs one home and one form of stability. Like the kid cares about the four walls more than the people in the walls. So I'm for 50-50, but when the other parent is using the child as a weapon and a tool and is an abuser, and the laws say, see, the stupid jackasses in the father's rights movement don't even read the laws. The laws say, in a lot of states, which parent can honor the other parent's parenting. That's a consideration. So if I can honor the mother's parenting, and I'm not going to undermine her, and she withholds a child from me for 40 days straight, like my baby's mom did, she's not a good custodial parent. I can't co-parent with her when she does stuff like that. So it's impossible for her to be the sole decision-making in a joint custody, have joint custody and joint decision-making, because she's intransigent, she's relentless, she's a child abuser. And if you abuse a child, you shouldn't have custody, right? I mean, if somebody smacks the snot out of somebody, or somebody beats up a kid and leaves him black and blue, would you, I know you're a stupid jackass, but would you really say, oh, I'm going for 50-50 even though she beats the snot out of the child? No, you would want to rescue the child from that. Okay, the psychological abuse of withholding a father from a child is a form of child abuse. All you guys hypocritically talk about that all the time. But then you're saying, I don't want to rescue the child from the child abuser. And those emotional and psychological and mental scars from not seeing your dad for 2 or 3 months, and the mother said your dad didn't want you, and feeling rejected by your dad and being mad at your dad and hurt, and now you got to recover. Some of those scars you never recover from unless you get it dealt with. On top of that, if you're the better parent and you can honor the other side and you can be peaceful and you can negotiate and you can listen to the other side, if you get custody, there's going to be peace, you stupid jackass. You just don't want peace. This is why you had drama, or why you were stupid enough to marry or get with a crazy woman in the first place. Now, I'm the first one to say, I was stupid to have a kid with a crazy person, but I own that. Okay? So I had hell to pay in court off and on for 18 to 19 years of my daughter's life. Even as a custodial parent, I was discriminated against after I got custody. They never once gave me any credit for anything I ever did raising my daughter. Everything was negative. I was a monster. I was potentially going to be violent. I drove the mother out of the state of Washington. That's why she abandoned our daughter for 2 years and 3 years and 5 years and 7 years at a time with no contact. These stupid jackasses say it's child abuse when you alienate a parent, but they'll say, don't go for custody and rescue the child from the child abuser. What kind of imbecilic, moronic, airheaded, dumbed-down nonsense is that? And then I tell a guy, why don't you go for full custody? And they attack me. The guys in the father's rights movement, like a house slave would attack other slaves. It's pathetic. This is why we have no father's rights movement. There's no cohesion. There's no unity. They don't listen to people who are veterans in this war on fathers. A bunch of rookies come in and they're know-it-all, arrogant, egomaniac pricks, and they think they know it all because they saw a couple of court hearings. And I've been through countless hearings, countless trials, countless appeals, one in the Court of Appeals without an attorney, kicked butt on attorneys with 17 years and 50 years experience. And you're going to tell me I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. And you've never accomplished anything. And then on top of that, I've had custody of my daughter for 18 years. Got her when she was 7 months old. And when I got custody, I kicked an attorney's butt. And I barely knew 1% of what I know now. And I'm sitting here sharing information for free for people of my own time and volition. And you've never shared a piece of information that's helped anybody get anything. And you're telling me to hope and wish that someday down the road, there's going to be 50-50 laws and equality. And I'm supposed to hold my breath waiting for you. At the age I'm at now, after being in and out, after working with Father's Rights Group for a decade, who accomplished nothing and wasted my time and energy, and didn't even show up at the best chance to start changing the system by getting rid of some bad judges, I'm supposed to just keep trusting them. I'm supposed to just keep following you guys, and you're wishing a hope because you're brand new to this. You think because you feel in your feelings that there's momentum because you got a couple guys together and they went and protested and said, dads are people too. Come on, guys, rally with us. Please help make us equal, please. Please, pretty please. So you feel some momentum. I'm sitting here working with dads who are getting full custody of their kids now, or 50-50 right now. And you're sitting here with your stupid strategies that don't work. You're telling dads, don't try and rescue a kid from a child molester. Don't try and get full custody because that looks bad. Or in the spirit of fairness, we're not even going to ask for that. So you want 50% control by somebody who can't ever agree on anything, who's intransigent and relentlessly mentally ill and crazy and abuses your children. And you want to work with that person? Here's the other thing. If you did get full custody and you think the mother deserved more time, you stupid, dumbed-down, airhead, moronic jackass, if you got custody, you can give her all the extra time that you want. Duh! But if you have custody and she starts acting crazy and talking smack to you and alienating the kid, then you don't give her the extra time. The peaceful person has control. When we went to war with Hitler, there's a lot of collateral damage. A lot of people died. But there was a war that went on and we got on the offensive and we invaded territory and there's collateral damage, people died. But then there was peace because the good guys seized control. When Chamberlain was in charge of England, he tried to negotiate with Hitler. And while they're negotiating, Hitler the bully is swooping up France and Poland and Czechoslovakia and I don't know whatever else he got, you know. But when Churchill got in charge of Britain, he's like, screw you, we're putting our foot down. You're not going anywhere. We're coming after you. And then the war eventually ended because a man with testicular fortitude acted like he had some and got on the offensive. All you stupid jackasses in the father's rights movement think you're going to go to court and like, oh, I'm going to only ask for 50-50. Here's another stupid thing about that whole thing. The mother's coming to court saying you're a domestic violence perpetrating monster and a liar and a psycho and she's scared of you. Okay? You're saying she's worthy of 50% custody and 50% joint decision making because she's such a wonderful mom and a good moral person. So your own testimony is saying she's credible, she's moral, she's a good person. She's coming at you saying you're a monster. So because you just said she's credible, they believe her story and they believe you're a monster. You just helped her case, you imbecilic moron with an IQ of 12. I mean, I can't be harsh enough. I'm trying to keep it clean on here and not say anything super bad. But there's not enough cuss words in the world to talk about how stupid and what a bunch of sellouts. And I mean, the biggest example of a sellout I can think of is a house slave. I mean, you guys are on that level. Now, you're not out here physically whipping and shooting runaway fathers or whatever, but the principle is the same. You're out endorsing attorneys who are going to rip the dad off the next time. You know, in Seattle, there's a radio station called radio station KISW. And it's a rock and roll station, and they've had some talk shows on. That's where Tom Likas would have his show when it was on. I haven't listened in a long time. I never really was a fan of any of those guys or any of that stuff, but I would listen sometimes. And the redheaded kid from the Partridge Family, Danny Bonaducci, I think he's on there. He has a show. Him and another guy, a blonde guy, used to be on KSW. They used to promote Goldberg and Jones. Goldberg and Jones told me I'll get every other weekend. I said I live 3 blocks from my baby's mom. I got a whole video on Goldberg and Jones. I live 3 blocks from my baby's mom. I work at night. I can be my daughter's daycare. They said you'll probably still get every other weekend. So the mother's going to work. I'm off. And they're saying they're not even going to try and get me those times. Goldberg and Jones. Divorce for Men, lawyers. Now, there's a group called Divorce Lawyers for Men. Those are a bunch of sellouts, and they get 40% of everything you ever pay your attorney when you referred to their system. One of their attorneys was Raj Baines, R-A-J Baines, and he smashed his daughter's head on a countertop, and he got a criminal conviction. He was suspended by the Bar Association, but now he's right back being a family law attorney. So in his own family law case, in his own divorce, he abused one kid. He's restrained from that kid. He's a family law attorney, and divorce lawyers for men refer people to him. Once I pointed that out and exposed it, and I told them I was exposing them, they took Raj Baines out of their network. But that's how the father's rights attorneys work. Goldberg and Jones used to be on KISW. They're advertised on KJR Sports Radio. I wrote those guys and said what sellouts they are, and some of the guys are like, I feel where you're coming from, but it's advertising dollars. That's all we care about. So, I'm gonna see if I can find. So these are the sellouts that they refer people to. They refer people to the hustlers and cons, and they keep the perpetual cycle of that going. And trying to see if I can find the other guy. I forget his name, but anyway, KISW had Goldberg and Jones in the studio on their talk shows for a while. And Goldberg and Jones, I know a guy who got 2 hours of supervised visitation falsely accused of molestation. Goldberg and Jones said, well, you should be happy or lucky that and thankful that you got the 2 hours. Falsely accused. And I talked to an attorney who used to work at Goldberg and Jones, and he said they laugh at dads because they have a revolving door where that moniker divorce for men drives people to their office. Even if they sit down and do a 1 hour consultation, they pay a couple $100, and they constantly have that revolving door, even if guys don't fully retain their office. And they think it's funny. They laugh at how well they played the marketing game. So, people in the father's rights movement, those imbeciles in there will refer guys, oh, my attorney was great. And nobody says, why are they great? What result did you get? Was it a big fight, or did the mother settle out of court because she was going to settle anyway? Nobody asks those questions. Nobody asks their own attorney. How many dads have you helped get 50-50 in a contested case? How many dads have you helped get custody? I stopped counting at 200 dads I worked with that got full custody without a lawyer. I've never heard of an attorney who's helped more than 10 dads get full custody. Sometimes when I ask attorneys when they've claimed to be father's rights attorneys, there's one in Southern California I saw him on Instagram. He came across because of the hashtags that we used. He said a dad should never go to court for contempt, that it's a losing cause and it looks bad. He said you can do it for money reasons where the judge can specifically grant a reward, but you'll never get that visitation time back, and it's really vague what they do, so you're probably not going to win. I got contempt on my first try. I got my baby's mom found in contempt the first try. That was one of the reasons she surrendered, and I got full custody. And this guy's telling dads not to use that tool or weapon. And it's the only way to hold somebody accountable for violating court order. And he's saying don't even try it because it looks bad and stupid stuff like that. Those are the attorneys out there. That's 99% of the attorneys out there. They don't want to fight for dads. And what does the father's rights movement do? They help you find a good lawyer, because this guy helped me get it every other weekend. You could have went to court with two hands tied behind your back and a blindfold on and got every other weekend. Look at your attorneys, you guys who are watching this video. When you've stood in court and listened to your attorney, or whether you had a Zoom hearing and watched your attorney argue, did they do a way better job than you could have done yourself arguing for yourself? Did they say anything spectacular or anything like what I say in some of my videos, like the video on 50-50, the number one argument for 50-50? They say anything like that? I guarantee they've never said anything like that. You could have done just as good a job, and you could have lost your case to being an every other weekend visitor and seeing your kids less than the school teacher. The daycare gets to see your kids more. The baseball coach gets to see your kids more. So you lost, and you're bragging about your lawyer and referring that lawyer to other dads. You could at least lost for cheaper than 10, 20,000. You didn't need that money. A lot of people say, well, I wish I would have met you or known about you at the beginning of my case and all that other stuff. You could have if you got off your rear and had some sense of urgency. I have a video I just did on my Instagram. Where's your sense of urgency? Guys don't have a sense of urgency, so they just listen and trust their attorney or blindly hand it over to their attorney. Because guys grew up and mommy did everything for them. And so, like, you know, you work hard, you come home, hang out with your kids and stuff like that. But now you want mommy to come rescue you, or you want to pay an attorney to go fix this because you don't want to deal with it yourself because it's too hard because your kids aren't worth it to you. So you have no sense of urgency. I found Dads of Washington, or Dads Against Discrimination. dadsamerica.org is their current website. I don't know if there's any chapter. Go ahead and look on it. They've been around for starting in the early 70s. See if there's anybody in any of those chapters on that website. You know, I was willing to help and volunteer and answer the phone line in Washington. And I did that, and I shared that with somebody before. But the headquarters in Portland, they wouldn't let me do it because I wasn't radical enough for them. So they don't want help from somebody unless they think that there should be a law that says dads automatically get custody, and if you don't fight for that, then... And they've accomplished nothing also. The guys at the headquarters in Portland. The guy who helped me out in Seattle helped me out a little bit. So, saying that to say, all the people in the father's rights... There's no father's rights movement. Everybody's wishing and hoping and holding their breath for one day down the road a 50-50 law passing that does something. And then everybody's praising and worshiping these guys in Arkansas who passed a 50-50 law that says that's the presumption where you start unless the judge finds it's not in the best interest of the child, which gives the judge a wide open door to continue to do the radical feminist bullcrap they've been doing. Your law is moot. And then you guys are like, well, at least give somebody credit for trying and doing something. Like, you stupid jackass, I just told you I've been working with fathers for 20 years and have helped thousands and thousands of them do better after they fired their attorney. I'm talking about actually seeing your kids now after they were withheld from you, or fighting off bogus restraining orders like I did 7 times in my own case. And you're saying, well, let's just give credit to somebody for trying to change the system down the road, and we're hoping and holding our breath. I watched for 20 years, nothing happened. I look at history, nothing happened in the 30 years before that. I'm not going to wait another 50 years, you stupid jackass. Grow a pair. Get out of your effeminate, feminized, simp, sissy little feelings and start learning how to act like a man and think like a man. Use that side of your brain. I forget which one it is. One's emotional, one's logical. Use the side of your brain that has some logic. Get out of your feelings. You're responding out of your wound from being screwed in court. There has to be justice, so this has to be it. How about you think hard about what I said and watch the video why 50-50 shared parenting won't work. And if you still want to spin your world, there's fathers' rights groups who spent years trying to pass 50-50 laws and got nowhere, and they got burnt out and left. So you're better than them? You just started doing this and you know better than all of them? Let me wrap up with this horrible example of pathetic sellout. I don't know what to call them. If there was an equivalent to the word, I don't know if I should say it, I might get doxxed on YouTube. If there's an equivalent to the word COON, I guess house slave is about as good as it gets. But in Michigan, there was a guy who was acquitted. I'm going to try and look it up as I'm talking to you. There was a guy who went to jail for talking bad about a judge in public. The judge ordered him, don't talk about me. Then he went to jail and he was charged with criminal contempt. He was acquitted after about 9 minutes of deliberation. So Macomb Dad, M-A-C-O-M-B. I don't know if that's a city or a county in Michigan. So there's a dad who criticized a judge, and then a judge, had them charge him with criminal contempt. So this dad went to jail, and his free speech rights were violated. Okay? Chesterfield Township man. So if you Google, you can read the story yourself. Circuit Court Judge Rachel Rancilio filed a sheriff office report She was charged days later and posted bond with the no contact condition. Maybe he made a complaint about, I was scared of the man who criticized me on Facebook. So he went to jail for exercising his free speech right. So he was in jail for 2 months. Jonathan Vanderhagen. If you Google Jonathan, maybe I'll put a link in the thing. Jonathan Vanderhagen acquitted Michigan. So you'll find it. So what I said was, I told the Michigan Fathers' Rights, group, and I told Fathers' Rights Central, which is headquartered in Ohio, I told them, man, you guys need to go to Michigan and descend upon this court system and bring all your resources and all your power and whatever to the court system and protest and make this a national issue, because people don't care about family court. People don't know how bad family court is until they get there. There's jokes made about baby mama drama. There's jokes made. Johnny Carson used to make jokes about how he'd have to give $20 million away to his first, second, and third wife after his divorces and give away half of the empire that he built that they had nothing to do with. So nobody cares about family court. But people care about their free speech rights. So because this guy's free speech rights are being violated, it's more than just a family court issue. So I told those guys, you need to descend upon this court and make this a national issue. This is a chance to make it national. Everybody's always talking about, let's make this national, let's get the press out and all this other stuff. This was a great opportunity to seize it. Duh. I told this to this guy a couple years ago. Let's see what year it was when this happened. I'm leaning over to look on my desktop. I'm old school. I don't do laptop. Oh, it was just a couple years ago, September 2019. Yeah. So I had a conversation with the guy from Ohio, and I was DMing him. The guy in Ohio, this is what he said. This is what sellout punk simps are leading. Now, Ohio is the location of the Fathers' Rights Movement Central, so it's a regional location, or it's the headquarters nationally. This punk, stupid jackass of a simp and coward, this ballless, effeminate she-male, said, the dad broke the law. We can't tie ourselves with rebels like that. You got to respect the law and respect the court and judges. And so he's in jail. So he's telling me this before the dad gets acquitted. He broke the law. So he's not convicted. He's not guilty yet. But he was actually acquitted. So he's found not guilty. But this stupid jackass in the Fathers' Rights Movement Central, he says, well, the dad did this and that. He violated the law. We can't affiliate ourselves with that. Plus, we're building relationships with legislators, and we can't be tied to anything negative. So, number one, you're a stupid, dumbed-down moron because this dad hasn't been found guilty. You assume that him exercising his free speech right makes him a guilty, evil monster. Number two, it's a free speech right issue, and anybody with half a brain can figure that out. If you're in the Fathers' Rights Movement, why are you taking sides when a dad is violated when he's exercising his rights? Do you also, when a dad's violated, let's say a dad had 2 weeks of vacation in the summer and the mother violated it and took the kid out of state, and the next time the dad had the kid, he kept the kid for 2 weeks to make up the time that he'll never get back. You might say, oh, that's controversial. I'm an effeminate little limp-wristed sissy coward, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and I don't even want to look bad. Okay, Martin Luther King was affiliated with communists because they were the only ones who listened to him at his time. He was considered a radical and a threat. Now everybody practically worships him and reveres him. But at the time, he was a rebel. During times of controversy is when men need to grow a pair and act like they have testes and stand up. But these simps want to hide and cower and tuck their tail because we let the dictators do dictator stuff and we bow down to it. And third, he's a total sellout because he's like, oh, I'm kissing butt and I got my nose so far up the rectum of a bunch of legislators and I want to kiss their butt, and I did photo ops with them, and I'm getting an ego stroke, and this is the best thing that ever happened to me because I'm famous. I was a nerd in high school, and now I'm famous because I'm talking to a legislator and it feels real good and I don't want to ruin that relationship. So you're like a house slave saying, I don't want to ruin my relationship with master and I don't want to be affiliated with you because you're a slave that ran away, so I'll shoot you or whip you or whatever to stay in master's house. You see, we're not even close to a father's rights movement. There's nothing there. Until there's people in the streets like the Me Too movement, or there's a march on Washington like like the Million Man March, or and even then those things peter out. Protests don't really work. It's when you build relationships with people in power and do something, or you force them out and they get fired when they don't do your demands. Politicians usually do something when they're threatened and they're worried about losing their power. I mean, most politicians have the voting rigged in their area if they've been around more than 10 years. So, but the ones who are worried about losing their job and being embarrassed and being made a fool of constantly, but a lot of them got the media in their pockets, so they're not getting made a fool of. So, but the ones who did, when the media wasn't totally owned by the same elite group of people who run everything, they used to be worried. You disturb their bubble. They're in a protective bubble. You go and disturb that. I've protested my judge in front of his house. He knows that he can't do anything about it. No one's ever called the cops on me. And I talk to his neighbors, and I go up and down the street with a sign that says he's a racist and a child abuser and a child trafficker in front of his house. I want his neighbors to know he might be a great neighbor. One of them said he is a good neighbor. I said, well, this is what he's doing at the courthouse at his job. Trafficking children, destroying lives, placing children with abusers, placing good dads like me in jail and not even asking if the child's okay when there's no mother or father around, when the abandoning mother doesn't even come and get the child when the father's in jail. That's a whole nother video in and of itself. But this is the father's rights movement for you. Don't tell me there is a movement because people are on Facebook ranting and raving. Do you want to learn how to fight in your case and give yourself a chance to win and be in your kid's life right now? Or do you want to go to some meetings and pout and cry and spoon another dad in the corner and curl up in the fetal position and suck your thumb and think of a happy place and hope and wish that this all goes away? That's all those father's rights. That's all. When I was with the group, the other parent, they were non-custodial parents' rights groups for mothers and fathers. I met some real good people in there, but there were no shows when it was time to show up. There were like 2 or 3 people that were adamant and passionate, and they got burnt out after a couple of years. Here I am, still here. I've told fathers' rights advocates who were actually really knowledgeable. There's a guy in Ohio that was part of a group called OHIO, and it was something hand in something, or Ohio Children's Rights Advocates. It was its own group. It wasn't the fathers' rights movement. But there was this guy named, he had a German name like Schlellenbacher or Schlellenbachen or something like that. And I think he was in a wheelchair, or he had a limp or something, so some of you may know him. He said he was going to get a 50-50 law passed, and he worked on it for a couple of years. I said, dude, even if you get it passed, it's not going to work. He said, yeah, it is, because we're going to have clear, cogent, and convincing evidence instead of preponderance. I said, if it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, the judge just has to say, oh, it's clear, cogent, and convincing evidence that you're a domestic violence perpetrator, so you don't get 50-50, the whole exception thing. He started talking smack to me because he'd been working on this, and this was his baby, and he had his ego all wrapped up in it, and he was going to be a hero and the MLK of fathers' rights movement, of fathers' rights. And after me and him argued about that, about 6 months later, a year later, I looked him up, and he's not even around doing this stuff. He's burnt out. Told you, here I am, dealing with stupidity every single day, fighting off idiots who attack me after I won. I mean, I won. I've won in the Court of Appeals. I've won contempt motions. I've won motion for discretionary review. I've defended contempt. I've fought off 7 bogus anti-harassment orders. How many restraining orders have you fought off in your own case? Like I said, I stopped counting at 200 of the dads that I worked with that got full custody. I have dads that come back to me years later and say, hey, I ended up getting full custody. We only met once, but I just took your information and ran with it. Then I got people watching these videos now, giving out information no attorney would ever give you unless you paid them $10,000. Hundreds of hours on Instagram and YouTube. Dads don't even listen to it, or they go, yeah, that's nice. And they still hire an attorney. They get royally screwed. They don't listen to me. And then after they hire an attorney, they get another attorney. Then after they get royally screwed, they call me up and say, you know what? You were right. Help me, save me from this. Like, you didn't listen to anything that I said, and now you're so far behind the 8 ball and down the rabbit's hole, it might be impossible. There's still a chance. But, you know, after your final orders at trial, it's kind of a little bit late. After you sign a mediation agreement and you act like a little punk and you surrender because it's too hot and sweaty in this mediation room and they're pushing me and pressuring me and I'm scared and I always get bullied into peer pressure and I don't care about my kid enough to take a stand and grow a pair and have some balls and stand up for my kid and say, no, I'm going to trial and I'm going for full custody. I got nothing to lose. The court might at least give me 50-50. You got everything to lose. You either sign on 50-50 right now, or I'm leaving. Bye. I got a whole video on mediation and how I deal with that stuff, or what a scam it is. But this is your father's rights movement. And then on top of that, this very day, this is what prompted me to do this video. Some group who's looking for father stories came across me and wanted me on their podcast. They set a specific time, and I'd canceled a meeting with a client that was going to pay me for my time so that I could be on this podcast, even though it's a brand new podcast. So this is what the father's rights. Everybody feels so entitled. Like, these dads have a welfare mentality. Oh, I'm entitled. You need to give me some free time. How dare you charge for your time giving out precious information that would cost thousands of dollars with an attorney? I spent $100,000 on an attorney. I got ripped off. And now you're going to prey upon my victimhood? You stupid jackass. Everybody makes money off of people's plight or people's misery. Doctors, psychologists, firemen, people who are in a fight, they make money putting out fires. I'm helping people put out fires and giving them valuable information that helps restore their life with a kid. You can't, that's priceless. I could be charging a whole lot more money for stuff like that. I could be not talking so harsh in my videos and giving you the hardcore, honest truth, so that I could win over as many clients as possible and be a hustler, crook, and con like some other people out there. But I got to be honest with you, and I'm passionate about this. And like I said, I'm a veteran in this. I'm a 5-star general in the war on fathers. Period. End of story. That's not a brag. That's just a fact. That's like Michael Jordan saying, I'm one of the top 10 players of all time. You know, he'll never say that he's the GOAT, but he still says, you know, I'm up there with Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain and stuff, and he has a right to say that because he earned it. He's got trophies. I got all kinds of trophies of wins against attorneys. If I beat an attorney one time by myself with no legal education, I was a warehouse worker who flunked out of college, that should be enough to convince you I know what the heck I'm talking about and you don't. So anyway, this guy invites me on his podcast. I rearranged my schedule to be on his podcast. I set aside some personal things I could be doing on top of a paid appointment with a client. I don't hear from the guy. I'm all set up to do a podcast. That's why I just went right into this. I'm all set up to be on his podcast and spend 2 hours of my free time for free, which will probably help build his following or build his podcast. But anybody invites me on, I'm willing to be on to share the message, because honestly, a lot of people who benefit from this information that I share, like almost nobody ever donates even $1. And everybody watching this is getting hundreds of dollars worth of information that an attorney would charge, but they actually wouldn't even tell you this information. Nobody donates even $1. Like, nobody's donated $1. I mentioned this on Instagram, but you know, the video where I got 20,000 people watching it, that's obviously a powerful video, and I get all kinds of praise and comments on it. Nobody's donated $1 after watching that video. Priceless information, people say in the comments. Nobody's donated $1. And I'm living paycheck to paycheck doing this type of stuff. I don't even have to be here doing this stuff. And you're the beneficiary of me sacrificing my free time doing this. And this is not fun. I could be out being a delivery driver again like I used to be, or getting fresh air every day, instead of I'm sitting here in my room, you know, making free videos for people that are going to benefit, and I'm not going to get any benefit from it. If there's no donations and people take this information and run with it for free, I don't get any benefit out of this except to be helping other people. Anybody who criticizes me for one iota of anything has got a lot of nerve and a lot of gall. But then when somebody tries to take my free time, doesn't communicate with me that they're going to be a no-show, or tries to set it up and wants my free time and feels that they're entitled to it, I said yes. And then they say they want 2 hours of my time. Most people will do IG Live with me, podcast for an hour. This guy's a brand new podcaster, brand new, just starting this stuff, has me set aside a couple hours of my day, canceling paid appointments when I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And then he's a no-show and not even answering my communications. That's the father's rights movement for you. Filled with a bunch of no-show, incompetent imbeciles who would get fired the first day on any job if they did at their job what they do in the father's rights movement. No organization, no committee. Now, there's been times where like I pulled an all-nighter, I didn't set my alarm or slept through my alarm, and I missed an appointment with somebody. But you know what I do when I do that? I give them a little something extra for free. I'll give them extra time on the consult if they want to reschedule. I'm at their mercy because I committed to meeting them at a certain time and I was a no-show, so I'm the jerk, okay? So I give them something free. This podcast, I wasn't going to get anything out of it. They're like, the dude has like less than 50 followers, I think, on Instagram, and is just starting a YouTube channel. I'm not going to get droves of people who are going to pay me for appointments. He's going to get the benefit of legitimate somebody on there, and he's asking if I'm going to get on there and give advice and information and all this other stuff. Free stuff that I could easily charge people a whole lot more money than what I'm charging for. And this jerk is a no-show. Now, maybe he had an emergency or something. He still should give me the courtesy of just a quick little, hey, I got an emergency, sorry, I can't make it. Something like that. Again, if I'm a no-show or I screw up, I give something to free for somebody. I might give them a packet that costs $20 or $40. I got packets of documents, defending a restraining order packet, contempt motion packet, defending contempt packet. Mostly all of them are $40. The trial one and the appeal one, because they're so deep and intense, those ones are $80. But sometimes I'll give them something free or give some free time, because it's my fault. And that's the least that I could do after they trusted me and were willing to pay me some of their hard-earned money to talk with me. So, but here I go, willing to set aside my time, energy, and whatever. And that person will never have a chance to have me on their podcast ever again. Because I set this time aside. I gave away a paid appointment, had to move that. Now I totally regret it. Got all set up here, took the time out of my day to block out 2 hours. And the appointment with the other guy was going to be just an hour. So I'm blocking out twice as much time and getting zero out of it. And he was going to get all the benefit if I went through with it. Willing to give my free time, money, sacrifice money and energy. And that actually was my only appointment of the day at the time when we scheduled. I got a couple other ones. So I had a couple of appointments today and I canceled one of them. So I'm still only living paycheck to paycheck, just making enough with this to pay the bills. I don't get 20 appointments a day, I get some days where there's a few, and sometimes I go a whole week without an appointment. And I have to survive off of that, or survive off of nothing that week, So, this is your father's rights movement. A bunch of losers who lost in court as far as not having any clue as to what to do in family court. They get a little bit of information, and then they start giving out bad legal advice on Facebook pages, and then the leaders won't take advantage of and seize an opportunity to make news nationally on this stuff. And then there are a bunch of sellout, house slave level type of Judases who, when a dad is in distress or in jail, they won't go there and be there for him. They'll say he's a bad guy because he's against the system that we're trying to kiss the butt of. Whoever you are in charge of dad, the Father's Rights Movement Central in Ohio. You punk, sissy, simp, coward. Now, I'll say that to people's faces because that's what they are. I hate when people lie. I hate when people sell out. I hate Judases. I can't stand that stuff. If you're going to take that side, then don't take the side of the Father's Rights Movement. Don't be a leader in the Father's Rights Movement. If you're going to take one side or the other. Or if you don't know what the heck you're talking about and you're doing a forum or a chat and somebody says, I need help with this and I need help with that, and then you're guessing at what they should do and giving them advice, you could lead them down the wrong road and totally destroy their case, you moron. Just shut up and say, I don't know about that situation. Maybe you should get some help. Or when somebody like me comes along and I drop free videos in there with no obligation for anybody to do anything or set an appointment with me, and then you attack my videos because you don't like what I'm saying or it's too harsh, or I give a different opinion, you think you know it all and you're the leader of the group. See, that's where you get a dictatorship. You're acting like a family court judge. You got a little bit of power and influence in your little group, and you get a rise out of it, and then you feel threatened if somebody comes in and says, no, you should do it this way, instead of learning like, oh, that's a good idea. That's why we should all collaborate and get together. And see, men can't do that. Women will get together and collaborate. Even if they hate each other, they'll get to collaborate. If it's a vindictive vendetta against men, they'll create a whole movement. And in the Me Too movement, they had people with a mic saying, what's this movement all about? Half of them are like, oh, just equal rights. Oh, just, equal pay. Oh, abortion. Oh, whatever. And they're walking around in their vagina hats and stuff with their daughters and sons right next to them and stuff like that. Not knowing what their goal or movement was. They just knew they were mad and they were out there and they were just going to scream and holler and make some noise. And they're all over the TV. We can't get a few dads to agree in a little forum that, oh, this guy is a 20-year veteran of the court system. He might know something. Let's listen to him. No, they just want to fight like a bunch of catty little junior high school cheerleaders. There's your Father's Rights Movement for you. A bunch of Judases, a bunch of traitors, a bunch of sellouts, a bunch of incompetent morons, and people who are lazy bums who are no-shows when it's time to expose a judge or get a judge voted out, or no-shows. I mean, look at the information I have on here. He just deprived his audience of some free information too on top of that. So all the way around, total pathetic, subhuman piece of crap sellout. I mean, I'm trying to keep it clean as possible. I can't say enough about what a pathetic movement this is. This is like if the NAACP started attending Klan rallies. Or Jewish folks in Germany all around Europe, were waving the Heil Hitler sign. This is the opposite. You're the total opposite sellout. But it doesn't even matter because there's no, and I'll say it to anybody's face. I mean, there's guys who threaten me and stuff. I'll say it to their face in public. If they're bigger and stronger than me, I'll say it to their face because it won't change what a pathetic, subhuman, punk, sissy, effeminate, coward sellout they are. You could beat me up, assault me, or whatever. I'll still say it again. You are who you are. It doesn't change who you are. I might have a bruise or two because, one of my biggest critics, I'd go on Father's Rights pages and he'd go, oh, there he is again. This dad hadn't seen his kid in years. You would think he would say, James, please tell me how you did it. How did you do it? Or what do you think I should do? Or whatever. All he did was attack me. And I'm sitting here continually helping dads win in court. And then he attacks me. And I say, your little sign that says fathers are people too. What has that done? In all the years that you've been protesting, maybe 2 or 3 years. What is it? What have you gotten accomplished? And he has nothing to say except to personally attack me. There's your Father's Rights Movement for you. There is none. I would encourage everybody to do everything you can to fight for your kid right now and stop wasting your time spinning your wheels in those movements. There was a group called Fathers and Families. It was led by, even the guy who created the documentary Divorce Corp, Joseph Sorge. I emailed him one time. I said he wanted to do family law reform. He wanted to bring the European model where there's an automatic 50-50 and the parents don't really fight and all that stuff. He wanted to bring that, but that wasn't actually true. It was only in the Scandinavian countries, and it was, I get Europeans talking to me all the time about this stuff. But In any case, Joseph Sorge, great documentary, the best thing you could ever watch on exposing the family court system. Then he spent like 2 years trying to do seminars and having meetings and talking about how they're going to do family law reform and talking to legislatures or setting stuff up and yakety yak and same old. And now he's gone and nobody can find him. I've never seen him speak on the subject again. Let's see, fathers, families. There's a guy on Fathers and Families named Glenn. Glasgow. No, that's something else. Fathers and Families. Anyway, they used to have articles about, ooh, here's an article of a dad getting custody. Here's an article of this and that. Here's an article of some lawyer who said the family court system is corrupt. No change, no nothing, no whatever, just stories. Ned something Steen, I think. I think the guy was named Ned Steen. He was the president. They used to get donations to get money, and all they did was have a newsletter. So they had kind of a national forum. They did a bunch of photo ops. And the guy in charge of it, whose name was Ned Steen, there was another guy named Glenn. I forget if that's his first or last name. But the Glenn guy is actually in. He has a scar on his face. He's in the father's. He's in the Divorce Corp documentary. Glenn Sachs. Glenn Sachs was on there, and Ted Nedstein or something like that. But I talked to them before, and I wrote them, and they just blew me off. They said, oh, you can't be too aggressive, or you can't, I said, the dads are gonna, you need to vote judges out. All this 50-50 parenting stuff isn't going to work. Like, that's the way we need to change the laws and blah, blah, blah. Both those guys are gone now. They're burnt out. They made a bunch of money taking donations and doing photo ops and getting famous, and now they're gone. And here I am. I was in it before them. I was in it after them. So there's your father's rights movement. The average person gets burnt out and done 2 or 3 years if they were heavily involved in it. Most dads come out and say, how come nobody's doing anything about it? Oh, when's the government going to fix this? What about this and what about that? And all they're doing is asking questions like everybody else, and nobody's doing anything. And then when they go and protest, like I said, it's a bunch of wimp little feminine punk sissy coward. Dads are people too. Look at my sign. Honk if you love dads. Not disrupting or disturbing the bubble of judges, not volunteering to help them to get voted out, not doing videos and exposing them like this Michigan dad who went to jail for 2 months. That's a dad who has balls. If there was 100 dads like that in his state, they'd overturn the court system would be flipped around. They'd expose all those idiots and imbeciles. They would embarrass them into making just decisions instead of and because the father's rights movement doesn't do anything publicly and they only talk to each other. The victims over here only talk to other victims over here, and they don't go out in the streets or to people and the judges and influence the culture or change the culture of the courtroom, which is what I'm talking about in the arguments that I talk about, which is what I did when I went to court, and I overwhelmingly presented my case in an overwhelmingly colorful and clear manner and overprove myself. If you're not going to go out there and do that, and you're just going to talk among the victims, I mean, what if all the domestic violence victims in the 50s just talked to each other and never did anything and never passed any legislation? What about MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving? What if all the mothers who were tired of the kids, who had their kids die of drunk drivers, just talk to each other? See how stupid that is? That's what the father's rights movement predominantly does. Just sits around and talks to each other in forums, on Facebook, in their little meetings where they sing Kumbaya and have some popcorn, talk about how the system sucks. And they get mad at me because I'm out here telling people what worked for me and what worked for other people and how people are winning in court now. It's pathetic. So that's about all I have to say about that. I could go on for hours. I only wanted to be on here for like 30 minutes, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought about pathetic examples of how there is no father's rights movement. The most pathetic example of a lack of father's rights movement, filled with Judases, filled with incompetent morons who screw dads over with bad advice, is the father's rights movements in each state, TFRM. There's some good guys that are in there, they're trying, but the ones who are the leaders are the ones who are the most loud, go in there and say, oh, James, you're a radical, or we need to do 50-50, and I prove why that's stupid, and they get all offended and get their panties in a bunch because their whole life is revolving around it, and it's their new identity because they got bullied in high school and they never did anything significant in their life, and so now they're down for the cause, and now they're a hero in their own mind and a legend in their own mind, so they can't have me mess with that. And they're so stupid they can't look back 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years, and see, or 50 years, and see how for the past 50 years this has never worked. And then effeminate, sissified males say, well, at least give somebody credit for trying to change stuff. No. If the basket is over here, and I'm working on my jump shot and shooting at the air over there, and somebody says, dude, shoot at the basket. No. Give me some credit for at least trying. I'd look like a stupid jackass. You know, Thomas Edison tried like 1,000 different light bulbs before he got it right. If one of them that failed, if he kept at it and kept at it and kept at it, someone would say, hey, dude, try a different filament. Try a different bulb or glass or whatever. Try something else. And he kept at it and kept at it and said, at least give me credit for trying. You know, that whole definition of insanity, trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Everybody knows that means you're insane if you try the same thing and it's not working. These stupid jackasses tell me give credit for somebody trying to do the same old thing that never works. There's your father's rights movement for you. Screw TFRM. The father's right. I had to make sure I got it. They've never done anything. They're a bunch of pathetic sellouts. A couple rookies come in, and then the other guys get burnt out. Maybe some rookies take over, and then they're the ones who follow with the next loser legal strategies they pass along. Or somebody starts up a new movement or a group, and they get all egomaniac about it. It's just a vicious cycle. I'm not going to hold my breath another 50 years and wait for you guys. I'm working with and helping guys win now. Screw you guys. End of story.